Today we're talking about the written exam for your police officer application and how you can do your best at it and ensure that you pass. Let's discuss. Hey, before we get started, I have two gifts in the description for you. One is the Getting Started workshop. It's going to walk you through every phase of the hiring process. Plus, there's some nice hidden bonuses in there for you as well. The additional one is a coaching call with myself or any member of my team. Jump on it. We'd be glad to sit down, talk to you, see what we can do to help you even prep you for the written exam if you need to. Now, the written exam. Understand that there's a multitude of written exams out there. Some departments hire a third party examiner like the NTN, National Testing Network's frontline test for their law enforcement officers. Other states have state-specific tests, like the CJ BAT for Florida or the civil service exam up north in the northeastern areas. Others have their own independent exam per department, right? I had to think about that for a second. So others have their own independent exam. And it really just comes down to who you're applying to and what exam. Some agencies or some departments will accept one exam or a multitude of exams depending on if they partner with third parties or not. Almost every written exam is an education standard test. And what that means is it's testing you based on your educational hierarchy or educational limits. Usually in a 10th grade level, they're trying to see, hey, does this candidate have the criteria, the reading comprehension, the vocabulary, the writing capabilities to be able to articulate themselves enough for the law enforcement profession, which is usually around a 10th grade level. Other tests have expanded past that. Other tests have started evaluating other aspects, so where they evaluate your suitability, right? Some of them even going so much into psychological suitability. Some are even going into your situational assessments, right? Where they give you a video segment or they give you a certain criteria and they say, hey, how would you handle this type of situation? And while I disagree with them for the sheer fact that if they put you in an officer perspective and you have no training as a law enforcement officer, you're just making an educated guess on your moral beliefs, which there's nothing wrong with that. I understand that morality is a major factor within the law enforcement profession, but at the same point in time, if that was the case, you would give law enforcement full discretion to make any call based on moral judgment that they can, but you don't. Certain law enforcement crimes and certain criteria are mandatory arrest or mandatory cite or what have you, right? So it's hard to start off your career in that, hey, we're gonna give you carte blanche discretion in the beginning, but then we're going to take it all away from you. But we're going to test you with having carte blanche, ability to make whatever decision and discretion you need. So with the written exam, I just mentioned it, but you usually have three core components that every written exam has. That's a reading comprehension, where you read a certain paragraph or sentence, and then you answer questions based on those statements, right? The next is a vocabulary / grammar aspect where, hey, do you understand proper punctuation, proper spelling? Do you understand, proper sentence structure? Kind of that aspect. And then the last is a more writing component. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have to write out a full report, although if you do, you need to be prepared for that. Some departments and some exams do have that, where you actually have to write out a report and they'll assess it. And sometimes, it's, as I said, you're writing it. So you need to practice penmanship, right? You need to be able to write legibly. So you're going through and you're doing your writing section. Sometimes you won't have to write out anything. Sometimes maybe you'll read a written report and then you answer questions based on that report, right? So you'll go through and you'll say, hey, yep, this is a written report, and I'm able to assess it and analyze. Or you'll maybe watch a video segment, take field notes on it, which are just brief, concise notes. Maybe write a report out of it that way, and then take that report and then go and answer questions. And I've seen this in a multitude of different ways, as I mentioned before, but there's just no surefire way to say that every department's always going to have the same exam. As much as it would be ideal, different states have different laws. Um, Although you should be standardizing it across the board, it's just not. It's not there at this point. We'll work on it. We'll try to get it there. But even still, even if it was standardized, we'd be changing the questions, or we'd have a dozens of iterations of the exam so that no one could cheat on it. So those are things to consider. But what I will say specifically for the written exam is you can prepare. So here's tip number one. You can go to the department and look up whatever written exam they're going to have you complete. Right? A lot of times they will have a study guide on there. Now, the study guide isn't the exact questions you'll see on the test, but it gives you a concept of what the questions are going to be like. So if you know, I did the study guide for ABC Police Department and I was really struggling with vocabulary, well then that's the area you should focus on. I was reading all these sentences and they had an underlined word and say, hey, what's the synonym for this, or what's this meaning? And you're saying, I don't know, right? Because I didn't have a good vocabulary. I didn't have a good understanding of those words. I need to look at more definitions. And a lot of those words will sometimes be law enforcement centric. So, if it asks you, hey, suspect, or it asked you, I'm trying to think of another one here, but it asks you, detainment, right? What does detainment mean? And you said not free to leave, right? So or restricted mobility. Yeah, you'd be on the same aspect of it. So a lot of times when I see someone doing a practice exam, they focus on just doing the practice exam. One, they never read all the training that goes with it, all synonyms and adjectives and prefixes and suffixes, because it's all boring to them, and they're saying, oh man, I feel like I'm back in high school English class. But that's the key things, because I guarantee you at least some of the questions are going to be based on that, because no one would take the time to write all that stuff out if it wasn't going to be on the exam, right? It would just be a waste of time. So, and they want people to pass. The more people that pass, the more people they can get into the hiring process, the more people they can actually get hired. So you're going through, you're trying to do this written exam, but you're only doing the study guide questions, and then you're repeating the same questions over and over. So then after you complete the whole written exam one time, then you're going through and you're answering again. Well, guess what? At that point in time, it's just memorization. So you've already memorized all the words or all the questions. You already know all the answers because you looked at the answer key. You saw what you got wrong, and then you go in there and you're just doing it off of memorization. And it's not helping you, it's just hurting you. So do the study guide. If you're going to say, hey, I'm the type of person that needs to do, I need study guides, and you need an extensive amount of studying that way, then you would have to probably go out and purchase a additional study guide for that specific department. Now, not every department has a study guide that you can just purchase, right? A lot of times what you'll see a third-party one, which can be beneficial, but that might not be the exact same style of questions that would be out there. Or you just can't find anything on there, which is why, when we're doing written exam prep, when we're building out study guides, we're doing it for the sheer fact of the 3 core factors, right? The 3 core underlying written exam components, which is reading comprehension, writing, and vocabulary/grammar. Anything else outside this, we focus on a couple of the larger third-party exams, but anything outside of that, you're in a situation where it's hard to prep for those specific exams. Recently we've added some video segments, but what I'm getting at with this is it's impossible if that company or that department does not have a third-party exam to purchase. It's impossible to just study. Right? It's impossible for you to go out there, and if this is the only way you study and you don't want to read all the added bonuses or I shouldn't say bonuses, but all the added aspects that come with their study guide prep, and you're just focusing on the practice tests, you're not getting any better. You're just looking at an aspect until you do so well at a test that I'm going to do good enough to pass. Maybe if you're learning a little bit through that method, But if you study the practice exam that you're providing, most of them will at least provide you some sample guide or practice that, or some practice questions, and you go through them and you say, hey, these questions, I got the vocabulary bad. So then you go practice vocabulary, even if it's not specific to that department. You can still practice, words. Google, hey, what are common law enforcement terms? And then that way you can say, hey, I know what detainment means. I know what suspect means. I know the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor. I understand. Excuse me. I understand what evidence is, right? So I understand what circumstantial means, right? These are all terms that I tend to see individuals kind of get hung up on within their online, or not their online, but their written exam, when they go through their testing, and they come back and they'll say, hey, Frank, yeah, I did the test. Hey, I didn't know what this meant, or I didn't know what this meant. And I'll say, hey, go into your online course and look at all your vocabulary. Look at your dictionary, your law enforcement dictionary, and you'll see those in there with definitions. But you have to make sure that you're doing some type of studying to prep for the exam. Because if you get in there, maybe you are knowledgeable to do it, but then you don't realize you're on a timeline, right? And so you're taking a time test with maybe 90 questions, and you got 2 hours to do it, and you're realizing, hey, I got 120 minutes to do 90 questions. That's barely over a minute a question. And some of these reading comprehension have paragraphs upon paragraphs that take a minute or two to read. Then you got to go back up and filter through to make sure you're answering the question properly. It chews up a lot of time, and then you're rushing towards the end because you don't want to leave anything unmarked, and then you wind up failing it that way. When you can just work on reading excerpts and paragraphs, and analyzing those paragraphs as you read them in any aspect, right? In any format. You can do it online, you can do it in a magazine, you can do it in in a book, and say, hey, what did I learn from this paragraph? And then you can go through and say, okay, hey, this is the key details, this is where I'm pulling out, these are words that allude to key details. And that's the way I find that individuals usually pick up their pace when they do those type of practices. And it doesn't even have to be with a written or practice exam. I prefer it to be, right? Because at least you're training to the level of the test. But it could be any aspect if that department, as we stated before, doesn't have a practice exam, right? So that's tip number one, is you want to try and do as many practice exams that the department has available, right? Any free sample guides that they have. And then if there is one and you need more training on that, you're saying, hey, don't redo the sample one. You're just doing memorization. Go out, purchase yourself an additional one. And if you can, the closer you can get it to that department, if someone says, hey, I'm going to use California here. Hey, the Pellet B, I got a sample Pellet B practice test. Then there you go. That's specific. Hopefully do some reviews and research on it to make sure it's a good one, and it's helped some candidates out in the past, and then just go from there, right? And same thing if you're trying to do a post-exam, say in the Northeast or anything along those lines. But some departments will just have their own, and there's not going to be, a study guide for a small little sheriff's office that has their own written exam out of Ohio. It's unlikely. Okay, tip number 2. When you're going through and you're prepping, do not put so much stress on yourself that you're putting the exam on a pedestal. To the point to what I mean is, if you go in and say you're a bad test taker, right? It's not to the point to where, I have to get 100, or no, you just have to pass, right? Because every phase of the hiring process is just kind of pass or fail. Now, the better you do at it, yes, if it's a ranking department where they're going to rank their members, that's great. If they even get their results, some exams are just pass or fail. Hey, yep, this person made the pass mark. They got, out of 50 questions, you have to at least get 30 right, and the minute you hit 30, it doesn't matter where, they just, okay, this person's passed, write down, John Smith. And that's a pass, and they don't even keep moving forward because all they care about is passing candidates and then seeing, during the interview process, what candidate they feel is the best fit for their department. But in the meantime, you're going through, you're putting this written exam up on a pedestal, and you're crushing yourself because you're going into it so nervous, and you're just not ready for everything that can come your way. Or maybe you've done one written exam, and this written exam is completely different because it's with a different department. You're going through, and you're just saying, man, I just wasn't in the right mental mindset for that exam, because you're so stressed about it, because this career means so much to you. And I understand that, right? Go pursue it. Just don't let it beat you down to the point to where you're mentally stalled. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, where you can't make a decision, paralysis by analysis. You're over here trying to think about every aspect of it, when at the end of the day, once you pass this exam and you get hired on with this department, you will probably never think of that exam ever again, unless someone asks you about it and says, hey, how was this? And you say, you know what, I stressed out about it, but I passed it, so you'll be fine. Just go in, study. This is what I did. That's about the only time you'll think, but you won't ever fully remember the stress that you felt about it prior to taking it, if you pass. Now, if you fail, maybe you'll remember that a little bit more, but that should just be motivation to try harder on the next one, right? Maybe you didn't put in the effort. What I will say to this is set obtainable goals, right? So if you're just going to say, hey, I have a written exam in 1 month, right? I'm going to study for the first week. I'm going to study one day for 15 minutes. And then week 2, I'm going to study 2 days for 15 minutes. Then week 3, I'm going to study, 2 days a week for 30 minutes each. That is still more than most people will ever do to prep for their written exam. And it's more than you would have done if you didn't have that paralysis by analysis, where you're saying, hey, where do I start? And maybe you just start with reading about the department's written exam online on anything you can find, preferably from the department. You can get it from third-party forums and things like that if you want to. Just take it with a grain of salt about what's out there and understand who's posting what. But at the same point in time, one little thing to move the needle forward. If you're someone that is just frozen in, not necessarily, I don't want to say fear, but if you're just frozen from the stress of the test, one little thing to move the needle, and that's 15 minutes 1 day a week. That's it. Once you break that, once you bust through, you can say, oh, and what I find is most people do that 15 minutes, and then next thing you know, a half hour, an hour has gone by, and they've already done an hour worth of studying. But the hardest part was just for them starting. That's it. And that's with almost anything in life, doing something new. The hardest part for anyone is to just start. People spend more time, and there's statistics behind this, people spend more time putting off the things that they want to learn or do than it does actually doing them. So usually it takes about 2 hours, right, to kind of get a new concept, 2 hours of direct engagement and learning. But most people will put it off for 2 years, right? And I see that with law enforcement, applying for law enforcement. Someone will put it off for 2 years and then apply and then get hired 6 months later, and they say, man, why'd I put this off for 2 years? And it's just either the fear of the unknown or uncertainty, or even just the fact that just breaking that ice and getting started is really what makes the difference between those who have success and those who don't. It's not that they're better candidates. It's just that they press the button, they move the needle, they open the book, they submitted the application. And it's the same with the written exam. Just do that. And some people really struggle with it, but written exams, I'm not trying to diminish it. They're not that difficult. They really aren't. And I have members that I work with and that I coach that ESL, English is their second language. And all we did was we worked on some written exam prep, and we read all the directions to every aspect of the written exam for a multitude of agencies that release their public study guides, which, by the way, that's another thing you can do. That's tip number 3, which I'm going to get to. But that's another thing you can do is get these other study guides. But they read all these extra study guides, and they winded up, one, not only increasing their reading comprehension, but their confidence went through the roof. And some of them have crushed some of the hardest written exams I've ever seen. I mean, scored the highest on them I've ever seen, and they came through it. And they English was their second language, and the exam was in English, and they didn't understand certain vocabulary words, and they didn't understand certain reading comprehension criteria or grammatical aspects of the English language. And but they went in and they read, and all they did was read these practice guides, and they wound up coming through and crushing it. Now, tip number 3, and this is the last one I'm going to leave you with. It kind of touches back on tip number 1. If you want more study guides, understand, if you're reviewing a typical study guide and it's, hey, these questions, a lot of departments out there publicly post sample guides, right? Now, I'm not telling you necessarily to read all the directions for each one and get confused, right? If your department puts out one, you want to start and end with that one. But in the meantime, if you're saying, hey, I don't really have the money to purchase this this additional course for written exam prep, or my department is so small, or it doesn't have any type of course that you can purchase for prep, you can go out and get all these sample study guides from different departments. Just start Googling different departments, written exam guide, and look for the actual department one on the .gov website, right, or wherever it is, and download those ones and study those. Because why? They all have the same 3 core components: reading comprehension, writing, and vocabulary/grammar. And you can go through it. Now, each one you download might have some added components, and they might be a little bit different, but at least you're going to get a multitude of styles of how written exams are, and it's going to give you more practice tests and more reading and more submersion into it. And you'll be able to go through and use all those to better yourself without having to necessarily financially hurt yourself if you have those financial limitations. So that would be my tips for you for the written exam. There's a multitude more, but that's what we have time for today. Use this. Go out there, succeed. I know you have it. We have those gifts in the description for you to help you, to include. One of them has a sample written exam in them as well, which is the Getting Started workshop. One of the hidden bonuses in there is a sample written exam to just see where you're at, and it'll grade it for you and let you know if there's any type of component you're struggling with. Additionally, if you want more information, or maybe you're looking for more resources, jump on a coaching call with any member of my team or even myself, and we'll jump on and we'll guide you through written exam, polygraph, psych, background, whatever you need. We'll cover every aspect of your hiring process for you. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.